A few phrases from our earlier session that will apply here and that you may want to keep in mind as you're formulating questions and thinking about the principles that you hear today. Pour oil on troubled waters. Religious freedom is our nation's best hope. Through it all, God never let go of me. Laura made all the difference. She cared about everyone as an expression of her faith. An opportunity to engage again. Seeing the light and liberty in everyone. Gay rights and religious freedom is a vast topic, and work in this field is broad and complex. This panel addresses only a very small, even pinpoint, part of religious freedom in context of the many important issues that are related to the experiences of members of the LGBTQ+ community. I'm Erin, Cranor, an attorney here at BYU and a volunteer with the International Center for Law and Religion Studies, and I've been delighted to learn of the assignment to moderate a panel on this pinpoint part of religious freedom work. Through joyful experiences, I personally have come to believe that this part of the work is one of the favorite parts of our loving God. I believe that this part of religious freedom work brings God particular joy when we succeed in it. This is the part of the work in which we build bridges between LGBTQ+ communities and religious freedom. The principles of this particular work are the principles of relationship building. And the principles of this particular work are the principles of relationship healing of necessity. About half of our time together will be Q&A. Before that, I hope that you will listen creatively for principles of this particular part of the work of religious freedom. And I have two requests for our question and answer period. One, all of us have come here with questions in our hearts, and all of us have come here with statements in our hearts. And as we listen to Paul teach us some principles and Alice to share experiences in which you will hear those principles in action, each of us will think of additional principles, additional questions. Each of us will think of additional statements. During our question and answer period, please only ask the questions. And second, as the questions take shape in your heart and you're thinking through the questions that you might ask of our panelists today, please take a little time and consider what is the most concise way that I can ask this question. So those are my requests of you. I'd like to share Alice's bio and Paul's, and then Paul will introduce some principles of building bridges of religious freedom with LGBTQ+ groups. Alice will share recent experiences in which you will have opportunity to see principles, and I will rejoin the conversation when it is time for you to ask questions. Alice Parkin is an assistant director of Fairness for All, a community levee association. She's a wife and mother of 5 children. She's been a resident of Ashburn in Loudoun County. I just said it wrong. Loudoun County, Virginia, for 25 years. She's been involved in local school district issues in her community, including as a member of the Ashburn Farm Parents United, which led to parents finding a solution to an ongoing school boundary problem. She also brought together a group of concerned parents from various religions who were opposed to high school graduation being held on a Sunday morning. And because of these efforts, the Community Levee Association recently asked her to help volunteer with their Fairness for All work as an assistant director. The Community Levee Association works to remove barriers in Loudoun County that prevent human flourishing, such as poverty, hunger, unstable housing, insufficient access to health care, social capacity deficiency, isolation, irreligion, lack of political voice, institutional and individual racism, and political anger. And the experience that she'll share with you in particular hones in on this particular part of religious freedom work that we're having a panel about today, and that is building bridges with LGBTQ groups. Paul Hoybjerg is the founding partner of Hoybjerg Law. His firm specializes in advocating for individuals who've been injured in vehicle collisions, motorcycle and trucking accidents, dog bites, slip and fall incidents, as well as victims of abuse. Hoybjerg Law has offices in California, Utah, and Idaho. Mr. Hoybjerg has been published in Massachusetts, Utah, and California, and the Computer and Internet Lawyer. He's been interviewed and presented on multiple podcasts and has appeared on Fox and NBC. He co-founded the Courts and Clergy Lawyers Auxiliary in Sacramento, which combines the efforts of lawyers from the Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, and Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint faiths. Mr. Hoybjerg sits on the board of directors for the Sacramento County Bar Association. Mr. Hoybjerg has used his connections to build bridges with domestic violence centers, minority and religious organizations, and the LGBTQ plus community. So we'll start with Paul and the principles that he has to share with you, and then we'll turn it to Alice, who will share her experience, and then we will turn it to you to ask questions of our panelists. Paul?
Well, I appreciate the introduction, Erin, and it was funny in that opening session, Reverend Mary Ann shared a few things. I think she's the ultimate example of a bridge builder. She also shared the phrase that Laura made all the difference. I'm going to be using that quote a lot because that's my wife's name, and so we're just going to use that phrase in our family for forever now, that Laura made all the difference. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you all today, and to be able to, and I appreciate you taking time to be here as well. Today we're going to be discussing that no matter what you believe or how you identify, that we are all human beings who deserve respect, dignity, and kindness. We're here today to talk about how we can build bridges and find common connections between members of faith and members of the LGBTQ community. Now, as I started thinking about the topic, I thought about what the literal process was to be able to build a bridge. Building a bridge means making a connection from one piece or one area of land to another. It requires a firm anchor in the doctrine and in the beliefs of each, with that same love and kindness to be able to reach out to the other side. In the world of religious liberties or individual rights or LGBTQ rights, we are talking about building a bridge of communication, respect, and one that has the strength to connect people with different viewpoints and values. The basic foundation of this bridge is the love of God and the love for humanity. Today I'd like to share with you three things that can help you in your bridge building efforts. The first is that a faith and belief in God promotes a loving treatment of each LGBTQ community individual. Second, that by delineating between what is doctrine of one's faith and what is culture, you can love and appreciate members of the LGBTQ community without abandoning or equivocating your faith. And lastly, I'd like to share some tips and suggestions of how you can begin building bridges. Now, underneath everything, I want to share with you that my love for my Savior Jesus Christ has increased as I have worked to build bridges with each of his children and to try and treat them with the same respect, compassion, and empathy that he gives me. Now, first point, when we talk about the love of God, the starting, middle, and end point of building bridges between religious liberties and the LGBTQ community is the love of God and the love for all his children. Christ gave two great commandments: love thy neighbor and love thy God and love thy neighbor. No exceptions. When I was preparing for law school, I had this opportunity to speak with Elder Quentin L. Cook of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Elder Cook is a Stanford Law graduate and had a distinguished legal career. He asked me this question: Paul, what would the reputation of lawyers be if every time you sat across from an opponent, you treated them as if they were an individual child of God? This question and corresponding answer has motivated me throughout my career. The foundation of love is essential. Communication, respect, and empathy can take place when there is a genuine and sincere love for those different than us. Through this, we can take inventory of the similarities of humanity and the areas where religion and LGBTQ can complement each other. I thought Reverend Marianne did a phenomenal job in that opening session of illustrating this. Now, I've met with politicians in California, and I've shared that there is a misconception that religious liberties and individual rights are combative and are diametrically in opposition. Some believe that to build up one, you have to deface the other. This is false. They are two sides of the same coin, which is human dignity. When you degrade and deface one, you devalue the other. While different and distinct, there are constructive ways in which each can be respected and celebrated. Now, a few years back, I was invited to do a continuing legal education course by the LGBTQ president. The subject was how we can respect the LGBTQ community. The organizer asked us, what was your aha moment that made you want to treat others with respect? I shared that mine was that my faith invited me to love God and all of his children, regardless of their faith or identification. Members of my faith and of other faiths are invited to live gospel principles. The love of God does not promote its believers to shame, pressure, or force others into submission. Principles are taught and invitations are given. The individual is then free to choose for themselves. Similarly, we ask members of other communities to not shame, pressure, or force faith-based members to abandon their beliefs in order to be valued or to value others. Although religious liberties and LGBTQ rights are different, the sought-after result is not uniformity or an abolishment of diversity. Rather, the goal is respect and a tolerance of those differences. If one chooses to depart from one side of the bridge to the other, or choose a different location on that bridge, the goal is to provide a loving and supporting communication at each location. Ever present at each step is our belief that we are all children of God and are a people who get to share this earth together peacefully. As members of faith, we must seek to treat any member of another race, gender, or LGBTQ identification with the same love that Christ has shown to all of us. I would say in all of your efforts, seek to ask yourself, am I treating them the way that Christ has treated me? As we begin, progress, and end our efforts with the love of Christ at the forefront, we can also help our LGBTQ community friends build their efforts with the love of humanity at the forefront, eliminating unnecessary obstacles and getting straight to the core of where compromises need to be made. We can remain true to our doctrine while extending our arms in love and respect. Now, the second point, delineating between what is doctrine and what is culture. Members of my faith have shared with me that the biggest obstacle they have in reaching out to the LGBTQ community is that they worry that it requires them to abandon their faith. As I've been told, Paul, if we take one step in that direction, we have to go all the way and leave all that we value. Instead of doing that, they instead retreat to a place of comfort. Now, I've spent many sleepless nights pondering how members can extend their arms in love. The answer I have come to is that it is important to delineate between the doctrine of one's faith and the culture. To the devout believer of faith, they did not create the doctrine, and therefore they are not in a position to change it, abandon it, or apologize for it. The doctrine of my faith states that sexual relations are to be had within the bonds of marriage. Marriage is between one man and one woman. The doctrine is something that each member of the church is invited to live. The culture is different than the doctrine. Church culture to non-members has often been associated with the distancing from that which is different than us. Perhaps it's our history and the characterizations in the media, but some tend to believe that when we are apart or only with those that are the same as us, we are protected. When we reach out, we may feel vulnerable. When we do that, we actually get in our own way. Bridges are not built, and hurt feelings or misconceptions develop instead. It reminds me of high school. I grew up in a small town in Idaho, and we had about 10% active church membership. I played sports, and many of my friends were not of my faith. And I remember one friend told me, Paul, I can always tell when it's missionary week in your church. During that week, I'm told hello and get invited to people's houses that won't talk or even acknowledge me the other weeks of the year. We must, although that's done in good effort and I'm sure they had the best of intentions, it was a great seminary challenge, it gets in our way, and sometimes people see that. We must reach out because we genuinely care about others, not simply to check a box or as an obligation. May we help one another with virtuous causes, invite the LGBTQ community. We can invite them into our homes, to our church, to have their kids play with our kids, and to seek to understand what they value and just be a good friend. Now, a few years back, I was invited to speak at a legal forum in which we were discussing a Supreme Court case involving religious liberties and individual rights. I was the only member of my faith that was invited to speak. Included at this forum were secretaries to the governor, judges, clergy members, professors, and ardent opponents of organized religion. Some were quite candid with me and advocated for positions that if my faith did not accept gay marriage in temples, that they would seek to shut them down. It was a pretty hostile environment. I wondered what I could do. A week before the conference, we were having the baby blessing of my sweet daughter, Grace. I had the feeling to invite every member of the forum to our church and then to our home afterwards. Now, this may sound like some of your missionary efforts, but no one showed up. And not one person showed up. But what happened afterwards was actually pretty miraculous. An LGBTQ member told me, "Paul, that meant so much to me. I had no idea I was allowed to be in your church, let alone your home." I shared with him a picture of the blessing. I mentioned what baby blessings were in our church and how it is an acknowledgement to the congregation of a new baby. The congregation then looks after and cares for this baby. I shared how there were precious and pure traditions of my faith which were important to me. They then shared with me what they valued. They said that the reason why they fought so hard against religion was because they were afraid that religious groups would seek to take away their children. I had never considered this before. He shared with me that his LGBTQ friends loved their children just as I loved my Gracie. We were able to connect and build upon this mutual value. I told him I could not imagine that fear, and my heart sank. He and I have spoken many times since that conversation about the love of children and our common motivations. From that connection has evolved friendships. Because of that relationship, I have spoken at the LGBTQ Center. Our JRCLS chapter was allowed to have a board member seat on the Sacramento County Bar Association, and friendships have evolved. When I was preparing for this presentation, I reached out to the current LGBTQ bar president, and I spoke with her on Monday. I was able to receive insights from her, and we have now built enough trust over time that when a religious or individual rights issue comes up, we can immediately call the other person and get a reliable source of information and insight. If you are a member of faith, take solace in your efforts that you are not there to change principles or to bind your faith in a political or societal way. You are there to reach out in love and friendship. And lastly, I don't want to take away any more of your time. Ideas of where to begin. It's difficult to know where to begin. If I could suggest just a few steps. The first is reach out to other faith-based legal associations. Reaching out to the Jewish, the Catholic, the Muslim, evangelical, any other of those faith-based organizations, you can see how much you have in common with them. And then the second thing is contact the LGBTQ legal association. Ask if the local center needs anything. If their center needs a fresh coat of paint or needs some donated material or access to the local food bank, you can coordinate with your public affairs or communication director. If they're hesitant and if you're running into brick walls, I have spoken with my LGBTQ friends. They've offered to call organizations around the country and mention their good experiences and invite them to communicate with you. In conclusion, when we talk about bridge building, it's not about abandoning one side and going to the other. It's about anchoring in what the doctrine is and then reaching out in love and developing a culture which is true to the doctrine and emblematic of Christ's love. For the LGBTQ member, it is anchoring in their belief of who they are and what they value, and then reaching out to another person of faith with respect, compassion, and love. We can build bridges and find common connections. Whether you believe in God or of humankind, reaching out to those different than us can increase our love for each other and our love of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Let's make sure that mic's working and we'll move Paul's over. It's so quiet.
Is that working? Hello?
How's that up front? Up.
Does that work? Can you hear me now? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Alice Parkin. A year ago, right now, I received an email that changed my life, led to a change in my life, and led to me being here today, which is something I never dreamed would happen. Is completely out of my comfort zone. But I feel strongly enough about what happened that I agreed to come and share my experience. I received an email from a friend. He was telling me about a school boundary issue a school issue that was happening in our county, Loudoun County, Virginia. Loudoun County is located 35 miles west of Washington, D.C. There had been a lot of things happening in the news. A lot was going on, and there was a lot of divisiveness, hostility, contention in our county. My friend Chris Stevenson, who's the president of the Community Levee Association, which is a small organization in Loudoun County that promotes social capitalism and cares about people. It's a nonpartisan, non-political group. He was inviting me to share a letter with the school board and other people, asking them to postpone the vote on policy 8040. To give you a little background information, he had also joined with someone named Melanie Tagg. The three of us knew each other because we were all active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and had crossed paths with each other. As we started to engage in this and started to look at this, policy 8040 was the policy that our school board was being mandated to implement by the Commonwealth of Virginia to protect transgender rights. And with all the things that have been happening in the county with masking and vaccines and critical race theory and different things, this seemed to be the tipping point and a very, very contentious issue. And we were very concerned about the tone, the tenor, the feelings in our county, a place that all three of us had raised our families, lived, and was a wonderful county, and we wondered if there was a way to bring some peace, some calm, some civility to what was happening in the public square. Admittedly, I was cautious going in and very careful. I wanted to be very careful with, one, where I spent my time, and two, if it was something that I could feel comfortable with. As I went forward, it resonated with me, and I felt that going forward was the right course to take. So our first attempts, the three of us together, were to talk together about how we could engage, how we could try to bring people together and find common ground. And we started by reaching out to the school board and suggesting to them the Fairness for All approach, which we were familiar with, that Utah had had great success with. And we got very little response. People weren't that interested in it. And so we started to consult and decided maybe what we could do was try to ourselves to see if we could bring the so-called opposites together. Some who are advocates of policy 8040, some who are opposed to it. The opposed tended to be the religious right. We reached out to a variety of people, those advocating for policy 8040, an advocacy group in our county, Equality Loudoun, agreed to meet with us. They were very cautious, and we reached out to several people who'd been outspoken in the county opposing this. Some weren't available. We were on a very short timeline. The votes were going to be a few days later, the first ones, and the policy had to pass by August. This was June of 2021. As we reached out to several, we had several agree to meet with us. And so we were very optimistic that maybe we could bring these sides together and try to listen to each other, just try to understand and see if we could find some common ground. As soon as we had some people on each side agreed to meet with us, we ran into our first hurdle. Those who were supportive of policy 8040, the Equality Loudoun, became very hesitant about coming. They thought they might be walking into an ambush. They didn't trust the people that were coming from the other side because they'd seen them, heard the things they'd said at the school board meetings or what they'd said in the public square. And we realized that we did not have enough trust to even start the process or go forward, and that the thing we needed to do was backtrack and try to meet with each side individually and see if they could build trust in us. So the three of us asked if they would be amenable to that, and both sides agreed. and we set up individual meetings at the public library, and we sat down together with 2 members of Equality Loudoun and the 3 of us, and we had put together an agenda that was focused on trust building. And we started with just some basic exercises of having everyone go around the room and talk about a favorite childhood memory or what an ideal meal would be. And each person started to go around and spoke. And it was an amazing experience to start to listen to one another and understand each other, see each other's people, and to find our commonality in that, and to laugh together. And when we finished that, we asked if we felt like there was enough trust amongst everyone unanimously to go forward and to talk about our concerns or why we were there regarding policy 8040. Everyone unanimously agreed to do so. And so we went around the room and asked again why we were there to discuss policy 8040. And we heard the perspective of each person. We heard some amazing stories from the Equality Loudoun perspective, what their concerns and reservations were. I think one of the most surprising things for me was to hear them talk about their own connections to religion and their religious experiences, some good, some bad. When we finished that meeting, we asked if we felt there was enough trust to go forward, if they would be willing to meet with the other side, and they agreed that they would. After we closed that meeting, we met with the conservative side, and I think I've reversed these. We did the conservative side first. But the conservative religious people came in, and we had a school board member, we had an advocate who was very outspoken in the public square, and a couple of members who represented religious concerns. We talked to them. Both of these visits were very good. We did the same thing. We talked to them about a trust-building exercise and everyone telling about themselves. And when everyone agreed unanimously, we went forward and asked what everyone's concern was about policy 8040. We did discover after that meeting with the religious side that there were some more extensive views we felt for some of the people than just the religious concerns, and we felt like we needed to focus on just the religious concerns. And so we had a very good visit, but we felt like in going forward, we needed to ask some other people to come who were strictly concerned with the religious concerns, not as much with some of the other issues that were going on in the county. It was a wonderful experience, a wonderful opportunity, and we came away friends, and we felt, if nothing else, that we'd build up trust for each side with those of us in the Community Levee Association. When everyone agreed to do so, we went forward and we convened another meeting in early August, and this time we brought both sides together. And in talking to the people who came to the table in that meeting, they admitted that though they had some trust in us, there was still a lot of wariness and concern about walking into that room and what this would be and if we could have that meeting. And we weren't sure if we would even go beyond the trust building activities, if there would be enough to do so. But we met together, we started in the same way, introduced ourselves, everyone went around, told a little bit about a favorite memory, favorite story, we laughed together, we visited. We asked everyone if they felt there was enough trust to go forward to the next step. Everyone unanimously agreed. And at this point, we asked everyone what their concerns were. We had 3 people there from Equality Loudoun, 3 people with religious concerns, and 3 of us from the Community Levee Association. So the 9 of us were there together, and we all explained our reasons for being there, discussing this policy about the transgender protections. We knew that this policy had to go forward. We knew that there were enough votes that it was a foregone conclusion it was going to, but our intention was if everyone felt comfortable enough to go forward, and thankfully, after everyone talked about their experiences, they all unanimously agreed to go forward. We then discussed whether or not we could find common ground or concerns if we could discuss this policy, and if there was any additional language we felt we could agree upon to offer to the school board to address everyone's concerns instead of it being but seemed to be kind of one-sided and very divisive. Everyone agreed that we could do this, and so we got the policy out, and we started going over it, and we talked, and it started to go quite late, and we decided that we would end the meeting, but a simple solution was proposed to put together a Google document that everyone could access from their homes, and in the next 24 hours, everyone looked this over and talked back and forth, discussed with one another clarification and such, and we came up with 10 points where we thought we could, places where we thought we could add language to the policy and enhance it and address a little broader the concerns of everyone. We had had some very healthy discussions about some things in this that had to do with pronouns, bathroom access, sports, school activities, what teachers' roles were. There were a number of issues, parental rights. We had some very, very good discussions. One of them, a couple of things that were the most interesting for me and life-changing were to realize that we were all there together when we realized our largest common ground was the concerns of children, and that we were all there because of children. And as I sat there as a mother and heard the people from Equality Loudoun talk about their very deep concerns about bathroom access and bathroom concerns, I suddenly realized I had a child as a kindergartner who was terrified to go to the bathroom because of the loud toilet flush. And I realized, I understood what a concern this can be and what a detriment it can be to a child as they're trying to go to school. All of a sudden, the commonality, the humanity amongst us was increased. And we could understand one another. We could understand each other's perspectives. When we worked together on this Google Doc, the Community Levee Association voted as one vote together, and each of the other participants, the 6, each had a vote. And with this Google Doc, we decided we wouldn't do anything until we were all unanimous. And so everyone then gave a vote whether or not they agreed with the language that we'd put in, or whether or not they opposed it, or whether or not they felt it needed further modification. As we went back and forth and had the time deadline, the vote was coming up in a few days, we were amazed we'd even gone beyond the trust spot where we had introduced it, saying we didn't know if we would even move beyond that, to actually working on the policy to present to the school board. And we came up with 8 wording changes, suggestions that we all agreed on. And we took them to the school board, we presented them, we explained the process we'd been through. We had initially invited them to bring the stakeholders together. It hadn't happened, and here we brought the stakeholders together and offered this again as a Fairness for All approach, and asked them to please consider some of these amendments and wording changes to the policy as the vote came up. We were stunned, pleased, and so grateful that the school board actually started to reach out to us, ask us about it. One of them even said, we wish we'd done this, and they proposed 2 of our amendments, and 1 passed, which had to do with expanding privacy for bathrooms and locker rooms. Even if we hadn't gotten that far, we felt that the trust exercise and the bringing together of the 2 sides was a huge success. We didn't know if we could do that when we started it. We were just 3 inexperienced people who came from a variety of backgrounds. Some had been engaged in the public square more than others, but we cared about our county, we cared about our children, and we especially cared about finding a way to communicate with one another in a kind, civil, cooperative way, and see if we could bring about change that would address fairness for all. It was great to be a part of this, and we hope that we can apply this model, this work that we did, in other contentious issues or be a resource for others, because we know that it can make a difference. It was small, it was on a local level, but that's really what matters and where it starts. And so thank you for letting me share that with you.
Just one. Okay, we just have one mic, so my co-volunteer with the center will be sprinting here and there because we want to catch your question on the recording of the sessions for those people that will be watching later and learning what we've been learning today. What questions come to mind? Raise a hand and, sorry.
I can speak up.
Let's run it up there.
Wait.
Yeah, let's go ahead and catch it on the recording.
Need it on the mic. Sorry, yes. Oh, wait, the top.
Okay, I have a question. And I want you to tell me, the last presenter specifically, it sounds to me like one thing I've learned from what you had to say is that your position was that the process is more important than the actual result in terms of the policy that is implemented. In other words, the means by which the decision is reached is more important than the actual decision that's reached in your particular situation. Is that a correct statement?
We had this conversation last night at dinner, didn't we? Alice and then Paul?
Yes, in our situation, and I would say generally, I believe that's the case. What I should also add is that Equality Loudoun had no reason to come to the table. They had no reason to even meet with us. We want to give them a huge commendation and shout out because it was pretty well guaranteed that everything they wanted was in place, and it was a huge, huge step on their part to agree to meet with us and talk about this and to go through this process with us. I believe they recognized that it was in the best interest of children to have a better mood and tone in the county and have us work together, but they didn't have to do that. And so the process was definitely very important for us. And the final product was already pretty well guaranteed. And we were able to feel like we at least had a voice and maybe hopefully enhanced it and made some improvements.
I guess I'll just answer that. Obviously, the process is important, and I think you kind of look at the short-term process versus the long-term process. It may be something that in that particular resolution or what you're dealing with, you may not be able to get everything you want, but you're setting the stage for a long-term conversation. And I think that that's a critical component because the trust process that you set up, bringing together sides that normally wouldn't talk, without that, you're never going to achieve what you want to. But I think obviously the end means is still important. Just because we're talking about something and then they still get everything they want or one side gets everything they want, you've got to look for ways to be able to compromise, but that compromise often starts with the process. And I think that's something that, at least for us in our chapter, we have been focused almost solely on the process because in the location that we're at in California, specifically, there's not a lot of voices on one side versus the other. And so being able to demonstrate what those values are through that process, through those trust processes, are critically important for the long-term scheme of religious liberties and LGBTQ rights. We're setting the stage for a bigger picture.
Thank you, Paul and Alice. There's a question on this other side here. Maybe let's catch this one here first since it's convenient, and then we'll go across.
So while we're here today, we're talking about the idea of religious freedom, but I've noticed that you guys actually didn't mention that in either of your conversations. What would you call this? Because when we use the term religious freedom, so sometimes it can be a controversial topic. How would you name what you guys are doing?
What's the name for bridge building?
Well, we chose to call it Fairness for All, and we made that an arm of the Community Levee Association, and we talked about fairness for all, meaning everyone at the table, voices heard, having a place, and acknowledging everyone's concerns. It doesn't mean it's going to be equal or the outcome everyone wants, but fairness for all was our approach and what we felt was the right way to approach it.
We call it human dignity. Religious liberty. If I hold a religious liberty conference, I'm not getting one member from the LGBTQ community. And I can hold religious liberty conferences all day long, but anybody that's going to show up is going to be those that are already converted and those that are already tolerant of it. So we talk about human dignity because human dignity can go across any faith. Human dignity can go across any identification. It's not bound by age, race, nothing. And so when we talk about human dignity, it's also something that I can get anybody on board, and I can also not make it kind of a topic where if I talk to a politician and say, hey, I want to talk to you about religious liberties, they're not even going to answer the phone, answer the email. But if I talk to them about human dignity, it's an entirely different framework. And within that framework, we're able to build a lot of things and able to include a lot of different parts.
Okay, we have a question on the other side there. Put your hand up high, please, sir. Thanks.
Well, I'm here today because this is an uncomfortable issue for me. And so I'm hopeful of learning something. I appreciate the presentations we've heard. But as a just background, I'm also a personal injury lawyer. And
Right.
So I'm very tuned into individual rights and that sort of thing. I'm also a priesthood leader in the church. And so I'm concerned about the integrity of the flock. But for me, I guess as a member of the faith community, the LGBTQ has a moral component associated with it. Unlike other immutable characteristics like race, national origin, other protected categories, this involves, for me at least, a moral component. So that changes the dynamic a little bit in terms of how far does my tolerance go?
Is that the question that you'd like Alice and Paul to address?
Yes, address the moral component. And I understand that, you know, there are all kinds of moral standards out there. But this is a particularly sensitive one based on our doctrine, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so maybe you could address that, both of you, somehow.
Thanks.
I agree with you. I went in with very similar reservations, but I had the overriding feeling, these are my fellow brothers and sisters. I would like to at least listen, communicate, get to know them. We felt that the protection of other people's rights enhances the protections of our rights, and that reciprocity can only be developed as we become friends, develop trust, and get to know each other. And I kept going back to an experience I'd had. I don't know if it's as heavily as a moral issue, but it was an important thing for me. At one point, I was involved in our high school, and I kept thinking of this through this. I was helping our choir group. I was a parent volunteer, and we were looking at new choir dresses, and I spoke up and asked if we could have them modest, if we could lengthen them a little, we could have the sleeves. It was important to me. And the person that I least expected, who didn't have those same concerns, became my advocate, and she agreed with me. She said this would also help our Muslim students, and she went to bat for me and helped me. And that really helped me, especially as I went into this, to know that people who may disagree with me will support my views if we have a relationship and I share them. And I really felt that reciprocity from her, and it gave me a lot of confidence going forward in this.
A few different thoughts. The first is that when we talk about what our own beliefs are, I think you kind of have an offensive versus defensive approach, right? And it's kind of in the way that we approach it with policy. Either we're trying to take what we believe and having others do that, or we're trying to preserve our ability to practice and believe what we preach. Now, in that component, when we're really the principles of the gospel, just as I mentioned, are that we teach the principles and then we invite people to live them. They're not forced, they're not shamed, but then it's their decision whether or not to live them. Now, so you have this offensive versus defensive approach. I think kind of our leading and kind of the way that things have been going, we're much more on the kind of the defensive, where we want to make sure that we preserve our ability and we respect other people's ability to be able to practice those as well. What I've noticed in terms of my moral grounds and what I'm willing to do, I've had certain people tell me, well, Paul, when are you going to change your position? When, you know, if we apply enough pressure to your church, or if we apply enough pressure to religion, will you change your position? And they've asked me, when is your church going to change its position on this particular issue? And my answer has been this: as a believer of God, our church will change its position when God changes its position. And until that happens, neither I nor anybody else am authorized to do so. And when they ask me, well, why don't you change your position? I'm reminded of what happened when I went into this forum. And before I went in, I was getting, hey, we're praying for you and all these sort of things. And I got a call from church legal counsel right before I went in. And he said, Brother Hoybjerg, we're praying for you and we want to remind you of one thing. And at this point, I'm thinking he's going to say, you know what, you'll be inspired by words, or whatnot, and he said, I want to remind you of one thing. You are authorized to do nothing. You have no authority to bind the church in any way, shape, or form, and you are not allowed to take a political position. But just know we're praying for you, and good luck. And so when I go in those aspects sometimes, I take great solace in that, where I go into some of these positions, and I'm not going as a member, as kind of a political church figure. I'm going as Paul Hoybjerg, who believes in God and who believes in my faith. And I'm here to be friends, and I'm here to listen and learn from them and to be able to love them. And my morals, hopefully, they can see my morals, not necessarily my words, but how I live and how I treat them.
I think we have a question right up top there.
Thank you. I'm thinking of my own experience in having conversations like this in family and friend groups and on the local community. And I've encountered situations in which you find people that are less hard-headed and able to have those conversations more readily. And then you have individuals on both fringes that are just unwilling to bridge that, even have the conversation to begin with. I'm thinking of an individual in saying, look, I'll work with you, but I hate you because of X, Y, Z that your church says. And there was this good professional relationship, but beyond that, it was just ugly. And I wonder, with your experiences in dealing with these things, what are ways to understand that we can't do things, as you were saying, I have no power to change anything other than, being willing to engage in conversation. How do we reach those on each side of the issue where they're at least able to recognize human dignity?
Alice and then Paul.
The thought I had when you said that is, that was one of the challenges that we faced when we started this, is we had a hard time finding a united religious group, a voice that we could put together, because we had a variety of religious concerns and religious groups who were speaking at school board meetings. A lot of Bible quoting and screaming and loud voices, and some religions did not want to come and sit at the table because they weren't all united. They didn't have the same views, and they had a lot of concerns. And so all we could do was keep reaching out, trying to form those one-on-one relationships, trying to get to know people. And we took those who would come and that we could have be that voice. But I think it's that just continued outreach, being caring enough to be able to share this experience so people can see it, see the good, and continuing to one-on-one, but in groups and organizations like this, try to bring people together, but treat them kindly. I think it's how you treat people, and that makes all the difference.
I think for me, it's when you're addressing individuals that are on both sides, some people are just never going to change regardless. Sometimes they're motivated by money, sometimes they're motivated by other things, or even just sort of I like to study history, and I remember studying with Reagan in the Cold War, his philosophy early on in his presidency in the Cold War. When they asked him what his method of compromise was with the Russians, it was, we win, they lose. That was going to be his method of compromise. But then later on it evolved because he started looking at the individual, and he started looking for ways that they could be able to build up and they could really start making connections. And I'm not assimilating that to this at all, but I think just when you get individuals on opposite sides of the spectrum, you can start to appeal to certain fundamental human rights, individual in them. Even when I go to the most ardent, say, believer of faith, if I say, hey, do you believe that an LGBTQ kid should be shamed, bullied, to the point that they want to commit suicide? I have not yet met one that says yes. On the other side, when I meet somebody on the religious, on the LGBTQ front, to say, would you want to take away these precious traditions that I hold dear, that help me become a better father, that help me teach how to treat you better? No. There's no opposition. In the meantime, when you start kind of breaking down those fringes and even trying to make them see it a little bit different, you're building up these friendships to the point that you're making it a lot less risky for them to kind of join in and say, okay, maybe it's not just me crossing over this massive divide, but there is this group that cares about each other. They're there to do service with one another. And you start to kind of build this snowball effect where all of a sudden it doesn't become so risky for them to be involved.
We have the advantage of being right before lunch, so we have a chance to continue our conversation as you pick up your food. If you bought it in the hall, if you paid for lunch, it'll be in the hall here, and then we'll be right out on the patio. I've been asked to end at 11:10. Oh, sorry, I thought we didn't. I was asked to make a lunch announcement. Okay, we won't get to continue this at lunch. Well, we can, but we'll skip first. Let's do one more question real quick then, and then we'll scoot over to our next one. There's one right there to your left, Sean. Okay, you want to run? We want to get it on the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you for wonderful presentations. I am a Muslim and I do not have any problem with inclusion. I believe that diversity should be a cardinal value. In diversity is prosperity. But LGBTQ activism seems to face a huge amount of hostility in the cultural environments. For example, most African cultures, advocates of most African cultures argue that LGBTQ activism is a disorder and something against their cultures. Do you have measures in place to address these concerns?
I don't know that we have measures in place, but with our experience in the county, I guess we did have measures in place. We had a police presence, and the police came in, and there was some contention that took place and some arrests after the school board meeting. The school board meeting got shut down, so there were actually it was actually a pretty intense situation, and so yes, we have the law on our side, but again, relationship building, kindness, trying to diffuse the hostility. The only thing we can do is try to show a better way, because hostility versus hostility just doesn't solve it.
I think it starts with one person. It starts with one person, and it really takes that courage to be able to reach across and just, in our faith, we have that scripture, mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. It's definitely that it can start with one person, and then it begins with structures. You're then able to appeal to that humanity within those structures, whether it be police forces, governmental forces. These are things that, in my opinion, every single one of us as human beings have within us a certain light and a certain degree of civility that we can be able to draw upon. And so even though those structures may not be in place, those relationships can be immensely powerful.
Please join me in thanking Paul and Alice.